On a broadcast tonight, Korea's central bank lifts its 2014 growth outlook to 4% from a previous estimate of 3.8% after leaving its key rate unchanged. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is set to field candidates in the upcoming June local elections, retreating from its earlier pledge to abolish the nomination system. Plus, a landmark ruling. The top court rejects appeals for tobacco damages, saying there is no causal connection between smoking and lung cancer. These stories and more next on ARIRANG News at 8. Good evening and thank you for joining us. It's Thursday, April 10th here in Seoul. I am Doo Ji-hye. We begin this evening with a withdrawn pledge by Korea's main opposition party. The less than a month-old New Politics Alliance for Democracy has backtracked from its promise to scrap a system of nominating candidates for local elections in June. The ruling Saenuri party was quick to pounce with criticism. Our political correspondent Kim Young-gil has our top story.
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy announced Thursday that the party will field candidates for lower-level administration chiefs and councillors in the June local elections, reversing an earlier pledge to abolish the nomination system altogether. The party reached the decision after a public opinion survey and an intra-party vote.
The results reflect 50% of the vote from each side, the party member voters and public opinion survey. 53.44% were in favor of the party nomination system, while 46.56% were against it.
Both of the party's co-leaders said they would honor the results.
From today, I will do my best to win the June local elections. We have a rough road ahead, but I ask for the support of our party members. If we do not bring about reform, we will not win in the next presidential election.
The party will field candidates for the June local elections. We will bring an end to the controversies over the nominating system. We will stop President Park Geun-hye and the ruling party from winning, as they have broken their promises with the people.
The ruling Saenuri party immediately criticized the decision, saying the newly unified opposition party had already thrown away its bid for New Politics by overturning numerous promises. New Politics has been An's trademark policy since he entered politics in 2012. He says it's aimed at restoring public confidence by eliminating corruption and having politicians lay down their vested interests. Abolishing the party standard nomination system was a key campaign pledge of both the ruling and opposition parties during the 2012 presidential campaigns, with many believing it acts as a breeding ground for bribery and corruption. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
The diplomatic efforts for resuming the long-stalled six-party nuclear talks are underway once again. On the heels of a three-way meeting between the nuclear envoys of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan earlier this week, Seoul's chief delegate heads to China for a two-day meeting focused on North Korea. Our Connie Kim reports.
In efforts to make a breakthrough in resuming the stalled six-party talks, South Korea's chief delegate Hwang Jung-guk will visit Beijing Friday to meet with his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei. Hwang will likely discuss the results of trilateral talks he attended in Washington with the U.S. and Japan. Their meeting is expected to draw specific measures and flexible preconditions to bring Pyongyang back to the negotiating table. Shortly after the bilateral meet, Woo will head to Washington to discuss the outcome of his four-day trip to North Korea late last month and reopening the six-party talks. The news of Woo's upcoming trip comes a day after South Korea, the U.S., and Japan agreed to be more flexible when dealing with the communist state. The three nations had previously been firm on resuming talks only if Pyongyang took concrete steps to end its nuclear program. Now that all three nations appear ready to compromise, attention is turning to China and its role as mediator. Beijing remains as a secluded state's biggest ally, and narrowing down the different political interests of involved parties may be the biggest factor in resuming the six-way talks with the North. While making inroads overseas on the issue, South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se has warned Pyongyang that it'll pay an unimaginable cost should it carry out a fourth nuclear test. Speaking at a forum on reunification Thursday, Yoon said that the international community, including China, stands unified and is determined to denuclearize North Korea. The nuclear talks have been stalled since late 2008 over repeated provocations by Pyongyang. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
There have been no significant changes in the latest personnel lineup in the north, fueling speculation that Pyongyang may have chosen stability over change. Our Hwang Sung-hee reads into the political workings of the isolated nation.
It was stability over change at North Korea's 13th Supreme People's Assembly session on Wednesday. The meeting of the country's top legislative body is an occasion to find out who's in and who's out of North Korea's ruling circle and to determine the direction of state policies. Prime Minister Park Bong-ju and figurehead President Kim Young-nam were widely expected to step down from their posts, but both remain in office.
The fact that there were no major changes to officials at key posts, no revisions to external and internal policies and constitutions, reflect the Kim Jong-un leadership will be focusing more on stability rather than change after 2 years in power.
Wednesday's session gave a peek into the isolated nation as the young Kim continues to solidify his power base. Choi Ryong-hae, the top political officer in North Korean People's Army who has emerged as a rising star under the young Kim, was promoted as one of the 3 vice chairmen of the powerful National Defense Commission. That seat was vacant since the execution of Chang Song-taek, once the second most powerful man in North Korea.
Choi Ryong-hae is now Kim's closest aide both at the party and military, and therefore we can say he's the second most powerful man.
Experts say the appointment of Lee Soo-yong, the former ambassador to Switzerland, as North Korea's new foreign minister suggests the regime will bolster efforts in attracting foreign investment from the Western world. But some don't expect any major changes until next year, which is the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Workers' Party of Korea. Experts say this is when a new Kim Jong-un-style governing system and policies could be unveiled. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
South Korea and the U.S. will launch their largest ever air exercise this Friday to enhance military readiness amid heightened tension on the Korean peninsula. Seoul's Air Force said Thursday that the 2-week-long Max Thunder drill will involve about 100 warplanes and 1,400 pilots. They'll engage in war simulations involving aerial battles and disabling enemy air defense systems. The exercise will run through April 25th.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Yoo Ji-hye for a lively half-hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8, every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Move aimed at fostering startups is part of the government's 3-year economic innovation. The Korea Central Bank expects the domestic economy to grow 4% this year, up 0.2 percentage points from the earlier estimate. This came after the Bank of Korea's new chief wrapped up his first rate-setting session on Thursday, where monetary policies decided to leave the key rate unchanged. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
The Bank of Korea says the domestic economy is beginning to return to its normal growth track. In its new growth outlook released Thursday, the central bank forecasts the Korean economy to grow 4% this year compared to 3% growth in 2013.
The pace of recovery we're seeing now is 4% annual growth. This is matching up with the nation's potential growth rate.
The new growth forecast is up 0.2 percentage points from the central bank's earlier outlook in January. But the bank said the upward revision does not mean the domestic economy is on track to a stronger recovery. Instead, it cited the central bank's recently adopted new international standards on calculating gross domestic product.
The new standards, which include contributions from new sectors like research and development, mainly led the rise in the growth forecast. The outlook itself is not that different from January.
For next year, the bank expects the Korean economy to grow 4.2%, also up 0.2 percentage points. However, it lowered the nation's inflation outlook for this year to 2.1%, citing a drop in prices of agricultural products in the first quarter. The Bank of Korea also left its key interest rate unchanged at 2.5% for the 11th straight month in April, as widely expected. The central bank went on to say that there could be a rate hike in the second half of this year if inflation goes up. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Korea's benchmark broke the 2,000 mark for the first time this year on Thursday, gaining more than 9 points or 0.5% from the previous day, despite an unexpected drop in China exports last month. It was the third straight day of gains, with foreign investors buying more than $150 million of shares. The Kazakh gained 0.5%. Meanwhile, the Korean won closed trading at 1,041 to the greenback after hitting a new 68-month high against the U.S. dollar in the morning. The strengthening of the won is leading to fears that it may affect the price competitiveness of Korean exporters. In response, the Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ji-yeol signaled a possible intervention in the market if there's too much volatility. The council in charge of realizing a creative economy, which is one of President Park Geun-hye's key campaign pledges, has some advice for the president. It suggests better collaboration between the public and private sectors and fostering engineering colleges to help produce better results. Choi Yu-sun has the details.
President Park's advisors say the technology of public research institutes and the business management infrastructure of the private sector should merge to realize the president's vision for a creative economy. At a meeting of the Presidential Science and Technology Council Thursday, the head of Daegu Gyeongbuk Institute of Science and Technology spoke about how Korea stands just 39th in the world in terms of the economic benefits from acquired skills in the field of science and technology. Referring to what are called technology investment companies, Shin Sung-chul said public institutes are allowed to only focus on research while private firms take over the management. The profits from commercialization can then be reinvested back into research. A special committee of engineering experts and government officials also reported to President Park about the need to innovate Korea's engineering schools and how to go about doing it. They said while the number of university engineering school graduates in Korea topped OECD rankings last year, the graduates often lack practical skills and struggle to adapt in the field. That, according to the committee, is because schools assess and hire professors based on the number of their theses, not their on-site experiences. Also, they say there aren't enough exchanges between industries and universities. The presidential advisors then said schools should assess professors based more on practicality and motivate them to gain more experience in the private sector. They added businesses should be encouraged to cooperate with universities and the government could act as a bridge between the two sides. The proposed measures will be presented at a public hearing before they are drafted into a government plan. Choi Yu-sun, ARIRANG News.
And some positive note on Korea's trade front. Korea's exports of information, communication, and technology products set a new record for the first 3 months of the year. The Trade Ministry says outbound ICT shipments grew 8.9% in March from a year ago to $15 billion. The $41.2 billion recorded in the first quarter marks a new quarterly high. The sector also enjoyed a record trade surplus. Growing shipments to key trading partners like the United States and China is credited with the record numbers, with mobile phones, semiconductors, and televisions all logging strong growth. For the first time ever, the nation's top court has spoken out in a lawsuit filed by 6 smokers who used the country's biggest tobacco company. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the cigarette maker. Kwon So-hwa has more on the landmark ruling.
A 15-year-long legal battle between cancer patients and Korean cigarette maker KT&G has come to an end, and the tobacco company has come out on top. The Supreme Court ruled Thursday against patients who claimed that their years of smoking had caused their cancer. The dispute dates back to 1999 when 36 people, including 7 cancer patients and their families, filed lawsuits against KT&G and the country, demanding financial compensation. They alleged that the company had used chemical additives to enhance the effect of their cigarettes. The Supreme Court said in its ruling Thursday that there wasn't enough evidence to prove the claim. Back in 2007, the Seoul District Court said there was no evidence that cancer was directly caused by smoking cigarettes. 4 years later, the Seoul High Court did acknowledge that there was a cause and effect relationship between smoking and lung cancer in 4 patients, but that there was still no proof that KT&G gave false information about their cigarettes. A total of 4 tobacco-related lawsuits have been filed in Korea, but so far, none of the plaintiffs have won their cases.
I don't think this should be a matter of filing a lawsuit. Everyone knows there is a high risk of getting cancer when you smoke.
I feel like the court's ruling shows a lack of trust from the people towards the country. That's why I think there should be some compensation or an apology.
Legal experts say in the case of individuals, a case-by-case investigation is required on when the plaintiff started to smoke, when the cancer appeared, and a whole host of other factors.
If more tobacco-related lawsuits are filed in this way, there is a low chance that the plaintiffs will win. If they focus more on issues like unfair profits, they might have more success.
This could be the case in the near future, as the National Health Insurance Service is expected to file a lawsuit against KT&G soon, which would shift the focus from individuals to public organizations. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Korea's domestic film industry has been enjoying steady growth over the past few years. However, the enjoyment has been little easier to find for some rather than others in the nation. Our Park Ji-won explains.
Hongcheon County in Gangwon-do Province lies some 100 kilometers east of Seoul, and until this week, residents would have to travel about an hour if they wanted to watch a movie in the theater. But the opening of a small digital film theater in Hongcheon this week has changed that.
I only watched probably 3 films a year. Now I hope to watch more films as the theater is very close to my home.
Hongcheon Cinema is the nation's 4th small digital film theater to open in counties with a population of less than 100,000. The first was in Changsu in 2010, followed by others in Kimjae and Imsi last year. They are all financed by their local governments. Based on their successes, the Culture Ministry plans to support the opening of 80 more small theaters in rural areas nationwide by next year. The ultimate planning is to set up a small film theater in every district or county that does not currently have one. Another area that needs special attention is the independent film sector. Audience numbers for independent films have been on the decline since 2009, while the market share on the top 10 films last year reached some 35%, much higher than in the US at 24% and France at 26%. This is because nearly 95% of the nation's 2,100 screens are operated by the 3 major multiplex chains, CGV, Lotte, and Megabox. All are conglomerates, and they mainly play films that they have produced or invested in. An independent film director who has received many international awards says he still has a hard time finding screens to play his films.
Multiplex chains do not offer their screens up unless it's a film produced or distributed by their own companies. Even if they do, they show them at very unpopular times, like once in the early morning or very late at night. It's unfair.
He added, policymakers and movie fans need to pay attention to low-budget art films or independent films if they want diversity in cinema. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
It's time to check on stories making headlines on the global front. From school stabbing in the U.S. to a major cabinet reshuffle in France, we go live to our Paulie at the News Center. Paul, let's start with a mass stabbing attack at a school in the U.S. state of Pennsylvania. Have police identified a main suspect?
Local police officials have identified the 16-year-old suspect as Alex Reibel, a student of Franklin Regional High School in Murraysville, Pennsylvania. Reibel allegedly went on a 30-minute rampage early Wednesday morning, slashing and stabbing 21 students and one security guard at the school before he was tackled to the ground by an assistant principal.
I can tell you what we saw when we got there was a hallway that was pretty much in chaos, as you can imagine. A lot of evidence of blood on the floors in the hallway. We had students running about, trying to get out of the area. So subsequently, upon checking and seeing what we had, immediate calls were put out to EMS.
Reibel is in police custody and being charged as an adult with 4 counts of attempted homicide and 21 counts of aggravated assault. The victims, some as young as 14 years old, were rushed to nearby hospitals, with several needing surgery for serious stab wounds and damage to major organs. Fortunately, doctors say all of them are expected to survive. Meanwhile, candlelight vigils and prayer services were scheduled Wednesday night to unite the local community in the wake of the shocking attack.
A tragic incident indeed. Our hearts goes out to all the victims and their families. Now, Paul, moving on, let's talk about deepening crisis in Ukraine. Pro-Russia demonstrators continue to occupy several government buildings in the eastern part of the country. What is the latest?
Ukraine's Interior Minister Arsen Avakov has warned pro-Russian activists that the situation would be resolved within 48 hours, either through negotiations or a show of force. Avakov added on Wednesday that an anti-terrorist operation was underway in the eastern cities of Donetsk, Kharkiv, and Luhansk, where pro-Russian separatists are standing ground while holding cautious talks with authorities.
Do we expect a storming tonight? Of course we expect it. Anything can happen. However, we have reassurances that it won't happen. But you know, we need to stay vigilant, and our defense block, which is guarding the building, continues to function. People are arriving during the night. Lots of people come then.
The protest groups are demanding Crimea-style referendums to signal their independence from Kiev. The Ukrainian government says Russia is orchestrating the unrest to destabilize the country. It's an accusation that Moscow continues to deny.
Right. Hopefully next week's four-way talks with the United States, EU, Russia, and Ukraine will help diffuse tensions. Now let's turn now to Indonesia. Some preliminary results following Wednesday's elections have been released. Paul, tell us who's in the lead.
The country's biggest opposition party, the Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle, is ahead. They were able to capture about 20% of the votes, 5% more than the second runner-up and traditional longtime ruling Golkar Party. However, it wasn't enough for the main opposition to nominate its star presidential candidate and Jakarta Governor Joko Widodo without the support of other parties.
Jokowi or PDIP must think about who's gonna be the running mate, the vice presidential candidate for Jokowi, which can at least help Jokowi maintain the current electability and or popularity of Jokowi.
The world's third largest democracy after India and the U.S. will pick its next president in July. Official results for Wednesday's elections will be released on May 7th.
And Paul, before we let you go, France is undergoing a major cabinet reshuffle following last month's elections, and it looks like a famous French-Korean adoptee has grabbed a top ministerial post.
That's right, GA. Former Junior Minister Fleur Pellerin has been named France's new State Secretary for Foreign Trade and Tourism. Pellerin was previously in charge of Paris's digital economy and innovation. She was widely praised among industry leaders for her work, which caught the eye of new Prime Minister Manuel Valls. Born in Korea and adopted by French parents, Pellerin is the first ethnic Korean to hold a minister post in France. GA?
All right, Paul, thank you very much for that update. We'll see you back in just about 2 hours. And time to get an update on the weather with our Kim Bo-kyung, who is joining us here in the studio. Now, Bo-kyung, it was a beautiful day here in the capital. How about other regions?
Well, Tia, it was pretty much the same. However, dry weather advisories are still in effect in some places, mostly in the southern regions, so stay on the watch for forest fires. Over to our satellite map, the nation is at the edge of a high-pressure system from China, which is why we're seeing light clouds in some areas. Tomorrow looks to be another lovely spring day with daytime highs across the country reaching between 19 to 23 degrees. Other than that, nationwide showers are forecast for the weekend, which will definitely help take away some of that dry air. Looking ahead at Friday's readings, Seoul and Daegu hit the low 20s, while Gwangju and Busan peak at 23 and 19 degrees respectively. Down onto Jeju Island, daytime highs will reach 19 degrees. Dokdo and Mount Kumgang make it to the low teens. That's all the updates for this hour, but I'll be back with more after 10.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul. Join us again for more news updates on our primetime news at 10 p.m. Korea time. See you then.